Part 5. Tokyo's Most Affectionate. Author, Wodada Shuchu Wujin. Chapter 41. After entering the amusement park, the three of them walked together and began to look for the facilities to play. According to what Kurosawa Mitsuru had learned from the guide, the adult one-day pass they bought allowed them to play freely in all the facilities except the most famous signature haunted house, with no limit on the number of times. "We are here, let's play here for a while." Not long after, Kurosawa Mitsuru led the way to a house. "Are we there?" Ninomiya Chizuru held an umbrella and looked up at the building in front of her, a little surprised. She originally thought she was going to the haunted house, but what was the situation with this cute building? There were many people around, all adults and children. Obviously parents and children came to play. Children's playground. Igarashi Runa was also dumbfounded. There are not many indoor facilities in this amusement park, mainly occupied by large outdoor projects such as bungee jumping machines and roller coasters. Kurosawa Mitsuru nodded and explained. Hearing this, the two girls turned their heads and looked into the distance. One after another super large facilities stood on the surface, and the funs could be felt from a long distance. "Let's start warming up here first. There's still a lot of time, so take your time." Kurosawa Hikaru also looked at it for a few times, then spread his hands and smiled. "Warming up, does he want me to get used to this kind of relaxation, lower my guard, and then take me to the haunted house?" Ninomiya Chizuru heard his words and pondered the thoughts behind his words. When smart people talk to others, they not only look at what he said, but also look at what he did and the thoughts behind his words. "Then let's start from here." Although she was thinking secretly, Ninomiya Chizuru still nodded. Every building in the amusement park is ingenious and carefully designed. Perhaps the creed of Fuji-Q Highland is to create the most exciting adult park, but it has not fallen behind in terms of children. Entering the house, they put away their umbrellas and walked around. The first big project that caught the eye was the ball pool. That is, it was filled with various soft toys, and also equipped with large nets, pillars, rings, and slides. Although it was only 10 o'clock, there were already dozens of children playing in the facility, and parents and staff were watching. Kurosawa Hikaru looked at them for a few seconds, then turned back to look at the two girls and asked for their opinions. "Pass." Ninomiya Chizuru shook her head and waved without hesitation. "What a joke, she is a university teacher and a female doctor, how could she play such an educational project? The most unbearable thing is that she can't stand being watched by so many people." The second project is the building block park, which is nothing surprising, just a place built with building blocks. Judging from the children playing, this facility is even younger than the ball pool. The third project is indoor climbing, which is very cute and childlike, just like a cartoon world, and the results are exactly the same. The fourth project is a super trampoline. This time you can see some young men and women, as well as couples playing. In the children's park, there are not even many children playing this facility. The way for couples to play is very simple. Needless to say, a couple is demonstrating it. The girl lies on the trampoline, and the boy jumps until the elastic force sends the girl flying into the air, and the boy catches her with a princess hug. Following the demonstration of the princess hug, Ninomiya Chizuru immediately wanted to refuse. "Let's play this." Finally we found something to play, but before she could say anything, Igarashi Runa spoke first. Okay, seeing that she was in high spirits, Ninomiya Chizuru nodded without wanting to spoil her fun. "Let's go." With her affirmation, the three of them voted and Igarashi Runa rushed in directly. "I don't play that kind." Ninomiya Chizuru followed her footsteps and whispered when she walked to Kurosawa Hikaru. "What kind?" Kurosawa Hikaru pretended not to understand. "Don't play dumb." Ninomiya Chizuru rolled his eyes at him. The kind she was talking about was naturally the princess hug played by lovers, or men and women who have a good impression of each other. Before entering the super trampoline park, you must take off your shoes at the entrance. Ninomiya Chizuru sat on a small stool and took off her shoes with her legs sideways. She was wearing high heels, but no socks. With one hand, she gently took them off, and her beautiful feet slipped out of the high heels. Although she would wear black stockings at school, that was for the neatness of her clothes. Now it was the weekend and she was out playing, and it would be too hot to wear stockings. This scene made Kurosawa Hikaru take a second look. Unlike the mature and cold face and the slender and tall figure, her right foot was small and exquisite, as if it could be held in one hand, white and clean, and her nails were well trimmed, but there was no nail polish to embellish them, but the normal crescent white, which looked very natural and inexplicably cute. Because in his previous life, the fetishes of the majority of netizens, all kinds of foot control pictures were flying all over the sky, so that he saw too much and inevitably got a little fetish, but only a little. Soon, Kurosawa Hikaru retracted his gaze and took off his shoes, but he was wearing socks. Hurry up! Igarashi Runa, who moved the fastest, had already stepped barefoot on the floor of the super trampoline park and turned around to say. Seeing her so energetic, the two of them naturally followed her. When they walked in, Igarashi Runa jumped directly onto the trampoline. Woohoo! Unlike the usual stable ground, the trampoline is elastic, and with the depression and rebound, Igarashi Runa made a sound of joy. Soon, Kurosawa Hikaru and Ninomiya Chizuru also entered the trampoline, but they just walked in. Instead of jumping directly at the beginning, it was a bit awkward to jump on the spot. The two looked at each other and froze in place for a while. Come on, you two, have fun. Today we are here to have fun, not to build a team. Igarashi Runa, who was already jumping, basically couldn't stop, but she was speechless when she saw the two in mid-air. Although she greeted them like this, Kurosawa Hikaru and Ninomiya Chizuru looked at each other and didn't move. In the final analysis, it was because both of them rarely had fun. Unlike the time in karaoke, when there were many people warming up the scene, plus the entry-level singing skills, Kurosawa Hikaru now didn't have the skills of trampoline. Ah! Help, I can't stop. At this moment, Igarashi Runa screamed. Hearing her complaints turn into requests for help, Ninomiya Chizuru looked over. At this glance, Runa had jumped very high without knowing when, and lost her balance in the air, no longer in a vertical position, but in a slanted position. Although there was a trampoline, if she fell with her head tilted, she might get hurt. Seeing this scene, she immediately became anxious. But at this moment, Kurosawa Hikari had already rushed out. He strode forward, stepped hard one step after another, and jumped directly. Kurosawa Hikari took advantage of the elasticity of the trampoline to jump high, stretched out his arms, and hugged her in his arms, landing vertically and steadily. But before they could stand firmly, the elasticity of the trampoline sent them flying again. For a while, Kurosawa Hikari held Igarashi Runa in the sky. Until the trampoline bounced 4 times, Kurosawa Hikari gradually controlled the landing point, and finally landed steadily. Exciting! Igarashi Runa, who had just landed on the ground and was held in his arms like a princess, cheered immediately when she remembered the experience just now. Ms. Runa, please be careful. Kurosawa Hikaru saw that she was still fine, so he put her on the ground, feeling a little helpless. Luckily, he had learned the basics of leg techniques, archery, and parkour, and they were all permanent. He was very skilled in controlling the strength of his whole body, and he could keep his body tense and balanced in mid-air. Otherwise, when he was saving people just now, if he lost his balance, the two of them would have jumped around out of control. Tokyo's Most Affectionate. Author, Wodada Shuchu Wujin. Chapter 42. I didn't expect you to be quite strong. Because the near miss made people feel excited, Igarashi Runa stood on a relatively stable ground and couldn't help but reach out and squeeze Kurosawa Hikaru's arm. It's okay if you don't pinch it, but it's pretty hard if you pinch it. When he was hugged by his princess just now, he could feel a smooth and powerful feeling even in the air. It was such a wonderful experience. Wow, there are muscles. Do you have ABS? Igarashi Runa was a little surprised. She originally thought that Todai students were all weak nerds. Kurosawa Hikaru didn't know how to react when she reached out and touched her randomly. Unlike limited-time experience cards, permanent rewards will directly bring changes to his body. For example, mastery of archery has given him strength and muscles in his arms. Runa, be careful. At this moment, Ninomiya Chizuru came over, reached out and grabbed Kurosawa Hikaru's arm, dragged him behind him, stood in front of Runa and lectured. Isn't that okay? What you just said is exactly the same, and they are in sync with each other. After being forcibly separated, Igarashi Runa, who had just touched her abdominal muscles, felt a little pity, spread her hands, and then suddenly reacted. She extended her index fingers with both hands, pointed at the two of them and laughed. Still laughing, what if I fell on my neck just now? Hearing her teasing, Ninomiya Chizuru was a little angry. I told you, Kurosawa has ABS, he's super strong. Igarashi Runa didn't pay attention, but covered one side of her mouth with one hand, leaned into her ear, and whispered. You still said this. Chizuru Ninomiya found that she still had the intention to say this without knowing she was wrong, and she was immediately angry. Okay, I'll pay attention to safety. Realizing that she was really angry, Igarashi Runa immediately stopped making trouble. Honestly speaking, just acknowledge your mistake. Although Chizuru Ninomiya has not been a teacher for a long time, she cares about right and wrong. This is an occupational disease. I couldn't help it just now. When you came out to play, the result was the same as team building. It made me embarrassed to play alone, and I didn't notice my situation. After calming her down, Runa Igarashi began to defend herself. Don't worry about us, we will have fun. Ninomiya Chizuru thought for a while and said that it was indeed them who attracted Runa's attention. Then hurry up, Igarashi Runa urged. It's not that I don't want to play, it's that I'm wearing a skirt. Ninomiya Chizuru couldn't help but glance at Kurosawa Hikari behind her, then leaned into her ear and whispered. Are you afraid of being exposed? Igarashi Runa glanced down and realized the problem when he saw the tight skirt she was wearing. She was wearing culottes, so of course she didn't need to worry about it, but Chizuru was wearing a tight black skirt. Although it highlighted Chizuru's beautiful legs, the length was not very long, only reaching her knees. If she wasn't careful, she would indeed be exposed. Ninomiya Chizuru nodded. This was not her first time coming to an amusement park. She, Runa and other classmates had been to other amusement parks before, but she never expected to play such an item. According to her imagination, their goals today should be the roller coaster, the jumping machine, and the most important thing, the haunted house, so they didn't wear anything more suitable for sports. What should we do? I don't know either. How about letting Kurosawa hold you and play with him, and let him hold down your skirt? What did you say? Seeing her making such a ridiculous suggestion, Ninomiya Chizuru was a little embarrassed. Okay then, let's change the project after we play for a while. Seeing that she couldn't hold back her face, Igarashi Runa nodded and compromised. Kurosawa, Chizuru said she was afraid of being exposed. Let's change projects after playing for a while, Igarashi Runa greeted. Okay. Even though they were whispering, Kurosawa Hikaru still noticed the change in Igarashi Runa's eyes, and naturally noticed something strange. How about we play that? Igarashi Runa was still a little unfinished and looked at a couple not far away. Two people playing on a trampoline, the most typical couple and princess hug. Isn't that good? Kurosawa Hikaru was a little hesitant and wanted to refuse. Why is it bad? When Igarashi Runa heard this, she took a few steps forward, past Chizuru, and raised her voice as if to threaten. Okay, as they faced each other, Kurosawa Hikaru saw her little movements and kept pointing in front of him at teacher Ninomiya behind her, and agreed. Ninomiya Chizuru, who was behind, couldn't see the little movement, but she knew what Runa was pointing to. She originally wanted to stop this, but she thought that because of herself, this project could only be played for a while, and it was hard to speak out. After deciding the matter, the two people walked to a trampoline nearby. Come on, it's up to you. Igarashi Runa simply lay down on the trampoline and said. Someone had already demonstrated the basic gameplay, and Kurosawa Hikaru didn't hesitate. He stood beside her and started jumping on the spot. Runa, who was lying on the ground, saw closely the muscles in his legs that tightened with force under his shorts, and couldn't help but look sideways. I have to say that Kurosawa's performance was beyond her expectations. He seemed to be exercising regularly. After jumping on the spot several times and reaching a certain height, Kurosawa's body suddenly exerted force and fell like a depth bomb. Boom! The next moment, Igarashi Runa's body lying on the trampoline took off directly under the influence of that powerful force. Alas! Igarashi Runa didn't expect it to be so exciting and so cool, and she couldn't help but cheer. Following closely, Kurosawa Hikari also flew up with the elasticity and stretched out his hands to hug her. Unlike the emergency rescue just now, this time it was a steady jump, and the two of them started jumping non-stop. Kurosawa Hikari's arm strength is very strong, even if it is a princess hug, it is effortless, and he can jump up while holding her. Wow, Kurosawa, you are great. Ah! Kurosawa! Igarashi Runa cheered every time she took off. For a while, other couples who were playing were attracted by the movement here. Look at them. Some girls saw Kurosawa Hikari holding Igarashi Runa and jumping all the time, without stopping, as if they had too much energy, and couldn't help but pull the male companion next to them. Don't look. Another girl found that the male companion was looking at Igarashi Runa, especially her legs, with his head tilted, trying to see the gap between the skirt and pants, and immediately got angry. However, the design of the skirt and pants is difficult to show. Although it looks like a skirt, it is actually pants. They are a perfect match, the man is handsome and the woman is beautiful. Yes, yes. There are also couples who usually like to see handsome men and beautiful women, but they are calm. Although Igarashi Runa has short hair, it does not affect her beauty at all. Although her clothes are cooler and not like a little bird, she is still very beautiful. Ninomiya Chizuru, who was standing by, stood by with her arms folded, watching them play. Her slender white fingers kept tapping on her arms, and she felt a little irritated for some reason. What are you doing? Kurosawa obviously asked her out to play, but she was having so much fun with Runa. 2 more updates are here. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Tokyo's Most Affectionate. Author, Wodada Shuchu Wujin. Chapter 43. Ha 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 ha. Igarashi Runa's surprised laughter resounded throughout the super trampoline park. As she laughed heartily, people couldn't help but look at her. Ninomiya Chizuru stood on the ground like an outsider. The longer he looked at it, the stronger the irritability in his heart became. After jumping a dozen times, Kurosawa began to adjust and gradually landed smoothly. It's so cool. After landing safely, Igarashi Runa stumbled and almost lost his balance, but he still said he was satisfied. She had never thought that trampoline could be so fun. Compared to her happiness, Kurosawa Hikaru was very tired and pressed his arms with his hands. In the way of a princess hug, when holding a woman weighing about 100 kilograms, she has to withstand the force of every drop and rebound to hold her steady. Thanks to his eternal proficiency in archery, which strengthened his strength, A normal person would probably not be able to hold him firmly even if he jumped twice. You are really strong. Seeing him needing his arm, Igarashi Runa stretched out her hand to help him and said with a smile. With this pinch, her expression was also very rich, and her muscles were so hard. Thanks for the compliment. Kurosawa Hikaru had nothing to do with her and couldn't refuse. Chizuru, do you want to play? It's fun, super exciting. At this moment, Igarashi Runa saw Chizuru walking over and asked. Ninomiya Chizuru was a little hesitant when he heard this question. Seeing Runa having so much fun just now, she naturally wanted to play too. But before entering the trampoline park, she specifically told Kurosawa that she would never play this. Not playing. However, when she saw Kurosawa Hikaru's eyes, looking at her skirt with some concern, she shook her head. She could tell that Kurosawa didn't want her to play with this. It may be that she is afraid of being exposed, or it may be for other reasons, but her attitude is that she doesn't want to. Okay, seeing her unwilling to play like this, Kurosawa Hikaru felt a little regretful. He was indeed a little worried just now, but he was just worried about whether he could ensure that teacher Ninomiya would not be exposed. After all, there were many uncertainties in the air. Then let's change projects. We're almost done. However, Kurosawa quickly calmed down and said with a smile. Let's go see something else. His regret and loss were short-lived, but Ninomiya Chizuru still saw it, and couldn't help but feel a knot in his heart, and then nodded. We still have a lot of time today, the playground is huge and there are definitely a lot of things to play with. After that, the three of them walked onto the flat ground inside the trampoline park and began to walk outside. Not long after, they arrived at the next facility, the bumper car park. This paradise is fun for children and just right for adults. However, they still didn't go in because the bumper car was very small. If they wanted to play, they had to bend their legs to sit down. It was easy to be exposed when wearing skirts. Another miss made Ninomiya Chizuru feel a little depressed, and she couldn't help clenching her fists a few times. She began to regret a little why she wore a skirt today. Although wearing a skirt is more beautiful and more feminine, it will also make some projects impossible to play. If she hadn't been wearing a skirt just now, she might have been able to play on the trampoline. She was stimulated by me on the trampoline just now, and she definitely wants to play. But as your teacher, she is more reserved than ordinary girls, so she needs to persist a little longer. Taking advantage of her being depressed, Igarashi Runa seized the opportunity and approached Kurosawa Hikaru and whispered. You're right. Hearing this statement, Kurosawa Hikaru was stunned for a moment, and then he came to his senses. Unlike Ms. Runa, who has a cheerful and approachable personality, Ms. Ninomiya was his teacher before being his date today. He had previously considered today's date and made a special trip to test the eldest lady of Sci-fi. He did not dare to do anything too outrageous and only dared to act appropriately. For example, physical contact is limited to the wrists, and even the palms of the hands are not touched. The same is true for chatting. They are more cautious and do not dare to be too offensive. They are just chatting. At that time, he felt that in the relationship between teachers and students are often easier to let go than teachers. Just like Sci-fi Mirai, if he slightly provoked him and changed his mind, he would dare to joke about not wearing underwear, but he didn't dare to do that. At that time, he was already thinking about actively maintaining the teacher-student relationship, and at the same time, he would break the boundaries a little and try to become friends. Claw machine. At this moment, Igarashi Runa suddenly pointed forward and said. After saying that, she dragged Kurosawa Hikaru and Ninomiya Chizuru and walked over. It's such a waste of money. As he approached, Ninomiya Chizuru glanced at the instructions on the claw machine and frowned. The pass they bought today allows them to play most of the items, but claw machines, for example, require extra money. It's okay, Just have some fun. Igarashi Runa wanted her to start playing first. So far after entering the amusement park, Chizuru has not actually participated in any project. The claw machine is an unfair deal. The grappling hook has been adjusted and has no power at all. Although she thought so, Ninomiya Chizuru chose to spoil her interest this time. Indeed. Kurosawa Hikaru agrees with this view. Although romance is priceless, it is a very disadvantageous behavior to throw coins for a doll. Then what are you talking about playing? Igarashi Runa saw that they were breathing out of the same nostril and had the same attitude, so she simply asked. That shooting, I think it's fun. Ninomiya Chizuru thought for a while, looked around, and then looked at the shooting stall next to her. That shooting gun is not fair either. Do you dare to say that the gun has not been adjusted? Igarashi Runa was immediately dissatisfied when she heard this choice. At least it's more participatory, Ninomiya Chizuru said calmly. Claw machines are a typical scam, and she has experienced it a long time ago. 1,000 yen, nothing. Since then, she has made up her mind that she will never play claw machines again in her life. Okay. Shooting. Why is there no archery stall? As they were discussing what to play, Kurosawa Hikaru couldn't help thinking. Although it was a pity, they also walked over. 10 guns per person. Ninomiya Chizuru came to the stall, looked at the price, took out her wallet and bought 3 portions. As a teacher, she came out with students, regardless of how much money she had, she felt that this kind of expenditure had to be paid by herself. Thank you for your patronage. The stall owner had just noticed them coming over, and when he saw them, he didn't bargain, but took the money with a smile. Soon, the stall owner took out 3 cork guns, and took some corks, put them on the table, and made way. Who's going first? Ninomiya Chizuru took the gun and handed it to them. I'll go first, I want to see how involved this is. Igarashi Runa asked to fight. Holding a gun in her hand, she straightened her posture, facing the shooting target, and began to search for the target. The posture was quite decent and looked quite handsome. Tokyo's Most Affectionate. Author, Wodada Shuchu Wujin. Chapter 44. Igarashi Runa stood up with a gun, aimed at a palm-sized cat doll, and fired. The first shot missed. She had no shooting skills and didn't get her posture right, so it went crooked. A few more shots came up empty again. Snapped. The 5th shot hit the cat directly in the chest and knocked it down. It's really interesting. Finally something was gained. During the shooting process, Igarashi Runa had gradually grasped the trick, which made her eyes light up. Compared with the claw machine, shooting is indeed more interesting, and every time you shoot, you can feel that you are making progress. Especially the subtle sound of shooting makes people mentally shaken. Pop, with the remaining 5 shots, she shot 2 more dolls. 3 out of 10, not bad. Igarashi Runa is very satisfied with this harvest. It's not bad. Is this your first time, little girl? Your talent is amazing. The owner of the shooting stall is also a smart man. He is not discouraged when the prize is taken away. Instead, he is very happy to praise him. As he spoke, he put the target dolls back on the shelf, took out a few more unopened dolls, and put them on the table. Whose turn is next? I'll do it. Kurosawa Hikaru was a little eager to give it a try. Since he gained proficiency in archery, he has never had time to try it, but now he has seized an opportunity. Although this is shooting, not archery, it can be regarded as the same origin. At least in terms of aiming, he is very confident. The 2 women had no objection to this and made room for her. Kurosawa Hikaru stood in front of the stall, straightened his back, straightened his posture, lowered his head slightly while holding the gun, his eyes became sharp, and he aimed the gun at the target. Seeing his posture, the 2 women couldn't help but look sideways. I always feel that his posture is very standard and imposing, as if what he did is right. Especially his eyes and gaze were like an eagle eyeing its prey, which made people feel a bit scary standing nearby. This is a master. Seeing this posture, the stall owner was also secretly frightened and a little nervous. 3 out of 10, he can still make money, but if he meets a master, he may lose money. Puff. The next moment, Kurosawa Hikaru pressed the trigger, and the cork was ejected. However, this shot missed. Is it a fake move? As the shot missed, the stall owner immediately breathed a sigh of relief and said secretly. However, Kurosawa didn't pay much attention. He just picked up the cork, stuffed it into the muzzle of the gun again, and seemed to understand something. He raised his gun and fired again. This time the cork struck out and hit a rabbit doll directly in the head, knocking it off the high ground. Snapped. 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 Following closely, every time Hikaru Kurosawa loaded the gun and every shot, he hit the target, even a headshot, everything was smooth. His movements are very fast and smooth, and he doesn't even need to aim more, he just does whatever he wants. In the end, after 10 shots were fired, 9 out of 10 were scored. Except for the first shot, all the others hit. It seems to be quite versatile. Kurosawa Hikaru was very satisfied with the result. Even though the equipment is different, the aiming and posture brought about by archery, as well as the body's stability, can improve the hit rate. The first shot missed purely because he was unsure of the firing power and angle of the gun and was calibrating it. So smart. Ninomiya Chizuru was shocked and couldn't help but praise her. As for Igarashi Runa, when she saw her speaking out, she became silent. I practiced before, it's your turn. Kurosawa Hikaru was a little happy when he heard her compliment, and then said. Okay, because they all gained something. Ninomiya Chizuru also felt confident. She nodded and walked forward calmly. From this point of view, this shooting is not that difficult. Immediately afterwards, she followed suit, straightened her posture, raised her spear, and focused her eyes on the target with a fierce momentum. The first shot missed, she was unaffected and gained something. The second shot failed, but she remained calm and extremely relaxed. But as the third, fourth, fifth, and seventh shots all failed, her expression began to turn serious. Little girl, I can lie down on the table to assist in shooting at this moment. The stall owner was afraid that she would be empty, so he said. After all, this is an amusement park, not a private stall at a festival. The purpose is not just to make money, but also to let tourists have fun. No, thank you for your kindness. After hearing this, Ninomiya Chizuru glanced at the table and shook her head in rejection. It would be natural for a boy to lie down on the table and shoot, but as a woman, she had quite plump breasts, so it would be unsightly to lie down on her. Thinking of this, she regained her composure, took a deep breath, and concentrated on shooting again. The eighth shot still missed. This situation hit her hard and she was in a bad mood. She couldn't help but glanced at Kurosawa Hikaru sideways and cast a look for help. This glance made Kurosawa Hikaru a little dazed and impressed. Because teacher Ninomiya had always behaved calmly and confidently in front of him. Never had he ever shown such a pitiful look for help like that of a little woman. I'll teach you. Soon, Kurosawa Hikaru calmed down and walked forward. Ninomiya Chizuru didn't want to return empty-handed, she wanted to at least get a shot. Excuse me. Kurosawa Hikaru walked behind her and said softly. Immediately, Kurosawa Hikaru pressed against her back and lifted her slender arms from both sides with his hands. This action was very similar to hugging, which made Ninomiya Chizuru's body tense. She never expected that Kurosawa would teach her in this way, and she felt ashamed for a moment. What is the difference between this posture and hugging? Look ahead, are you going to hit that panda? Before she could resist, Kurosawa Hikaru's deep, rich, calm male voice rang out nearby. Yes. Ninomiya Chizuru felt his seriousness, suppressed the shame in her heart, looked at the panda doll, and nodded. Don't shake your arms. Adjust the angle. Aim. Shoot. Snap. Ninomiya Chizuru heard the sound of the hit, was a little distracted, and her body relaxed. But behind her, there was a man who supported her like a wall. He was very broad, very warm, and had a very nice fragrance. It was not perfume, nor was it a fragrance. It was hard to describe, but it made people feel very comfortable. Got it? Got it? Igarashi Runa, who was standing by, cheered immediately when she saw this scene. The reaction was so intense that people who didn't know thought it was a goal in the World Cup. That's it? There's one shot left. Try again. Kurosawa Hikari was also happy. He stopped supporting her arm and took 2 steps back. Ninomiya Chizuru stood in place, and the high wall supporting her back disappeared. You also know that there is only one shot left. Help me finish it? After hesitating for a while, Ninomiya Chizuru turned her head and looked at Kurosawa Hikari and said. What she didn't realize was that there was a bit of coquetry in her voice. The cold voice remained the same, but it was a bit more tender, and there was a bit of coquettishness in her tone. Okay, Kurosawa Hikari was stunned for a moment, and then smiled. 2 more chapters are here. Please recommend and vote for me. I also want to invest. As long as you read this book for more than 10 minutes a day, you can invest for free. Finally, I would like to thank my book friend, Zhu Jinggang, for the 1,500 Kidian coins. Thank you very much. Tokyo's Most Affectionate. Author, Wodada Shuchu Wujin. Chapter 45. For the last shot, Kurosawa Hikaru held Ninomiya Chizuru's arm and shot again. No suspense, another hit. Although the guns in this shooting booth are secretly adjusted, there are not many. The difficulty in shooting is whether the arm can be steady and not swaying up and down, left and right. Even if you switch to a photographer who is good at photography and is used to holding things steadily, your hit rate can be greatly improved. This is your prize. When the stall owner saw this result, he also smiled and took out unopened small toys one by one and handed them to them. What should I do with so many toys? There were 9 of Kurosawa Hikaru, and his arms were filled to the brim. Find a locker and put it away, and pick it up when you leave. Ninomiya Chizuru looked at the 2 dolls in her hands and said. Today's trip to the amusement park has just begun. If you take these dolls with you, you won't be able to play. After deciding on the matter, they found a locker near the entrance of the children's playground and stuffed all the dolls inside. Because there were so many, one was not even enough, so 2 boxes were used. Do you usually work out? After putting everything away and freeing her hands again, Ninomiya Chizuru looked at Kurosawa Hikari. She couldn't tell through her clothes, but in that hug-like movement just now, she could feel Hikari Kurosawa's strength underneath his gentleness. Occasionally Kurosawa shrugged. Before he got the system, he ran twice a week to maintain basic physical and mental health. You're too modest. It's not like you can train your muscles occasionally. Igarashi Runa has some experience in this area. Regardless of whether his muscles are strong or not, this guy has too much strength. Whether it was in the car, grabbing the armrest to prevent her from running around due to inertia, or just holding her while playing on the trampoline. Haha, Kurosawa Hikaru couldn't explain, so he just laughed it off. What to play next? Seeing that he didn't want to brag, Ninomiya Chizuru was a little curious, but didn't ask further. Before lunch, let's go do something exciting. Seeing that she asked him to make arrangements, Kurosawa said after thinking about it. As soon as these words came out, the 2 women couldn't help but look at each other. Could it be that we are going to a haunted house? Ninomiya Chizuru asked secretly. The most famous place in this amusement park is the Siji General Hospital, which is known as the largest and scariest haunted house in the world. Just at the door, they walked out of the children's playground and started an exciting journey. At the first stop, they came to the facility and had to queue. Fortunately, the queue was not long. Goofy car. Ninomiya Chizuru raised her head and looked at the buildings and facilities in front of her, adjusting her glasses. It would be a loss if you don't ride the roller coaster when you come to Fujikyo. Kurosawa nodded and affirmed. Fortunately, they don't need to queue like this. Have you ever sat there before? Seeing that he seemed quite experienced, Ninomiya Chizuru couldn't help but ask. No, it's my first time here too. Kurosawa shook his head slightly and looked up at the exaggerated track, his heart beating a little faster. In fact, if the date mission had not required an amusement park and a mission to make Chizuru Ninomiya cry, he would never have chosen Fuji-Q Highland. Will there be any danger? At this moment, Igarashi Runa suddenly felt a little scared. Unlike trampolines, the risk factor is very small. If an accident occurs on this roller coaster, it will be more terrifying than a plane crash. This statement reminded Ninomiya Chizuru. In addition to being exciting, this high-flying car may also be accompanied by danger. Don't worry, this paradise has been under construction for many years, and there have been very few incidents. Kurosawa Hikaru was also reminded, but considering that today's trip to the amusement park must be enjoyable, he reassured. Wow! At this moment, the roller coaster on the track made a sound like a howling ghost. In fact, as they walked closer, the sound could not be heard without stopping. Facing the high-speed car, no one can restrain themselves, everyone will scream. Not long after, tourists got off the roller coaster, and they all sat down with their bodies limp. They didn't even care about their image, and sat on the ground, as if their life energy had been burned out. Mom. Even more, some people were crying, hugging a pillar and shivering. Why don't you switch to other projects? Seeing this scene, Ninomiya Chizuru stroked her glasses again, her arms trembling a little. Come here, it's our turn. He would be scared when he saw her. Even though Kurosawa Hikaru was also scared, he still went ahead. Although the dating task did not have to be completed, he still had to do his best. After all, the talents and skills rewarded by the system were extremely effective. In addition, if you want to have a perfect date and a memorable memory, you can't do it casually. Soon, they entered the facility. Before taking the high-speed train, please put your mobile phone, glasses, bags, scarves, umbrellas, and other personal belongings in the lockers. A staff member came over and explained. When riding a roller coaster, due to the high speed and 360-degree rotation, personal belongings can easily cause accidents. None of the three people protested against this request, and put their mobile phones and other things in the same locker as instructed. Wish you a safe journey. After sending them to the roller coaster, the staff helped to buckle the safety measures, and then left the track and bowed. Unlike the ordinary long roller coaster, the high-flying car chose a short roller coaster. There are 6 cars in total, each car can seat 8 people, divided into 2 rows, 4 people in each row. In terms of seat selection, Kurosawa Hikari sat on the right, separating a male tourist, and Ninomiya Chizuru was on the left. Sitting in the seat, waiting for the departure, Ninomiya Chizuru took off her glasses, closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Rumble, with the sound, the roller coaster officially started. The body was fixed, but it was constantly moving forward, and the feeling of being unable to control oneself was very strong. The next moment, the roller coaster ushered in the first slope and began to accelerate. With the tilt of the angle, other tourists in the same team could not help screaming. Kurosawa Hikari was still calm, because it was just the beginning, not so exciting, just sideways to look at the people next to him. Chizuru Ninomiya closed her eyes tightly, and her lipstick-coated cherry lips were also tightly pursed, as if she was restraining herself from speaking, looking nervous. Unlike any other time before, Kurosawa Hikaru had the opportunity to look at her leisurely for the first time. So beautiful. Although she was not wearing glasses, and even nervous and closed her eyes, Kurosawa Hikaru still thought she was very beautiful. Following several slopes, the short-distance car began to climb to the highest track in the world. Ah! As she rose, Chizuru Ninomiya felt the weightlessness of her body, and finally couldn't help it. However, before she could make a soprano, someone held her hand. Chizuru Ninomiya noticed this, opened her eyes and looked, and met a pair of calm and steady, and somewhat gentle black eyes. That gentle look seemed to say, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." The palm holding her was big and warm, as if it could stabilize her body and mind, making people feel safe. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Tokyo's Most Affectionate. Author, Wodada Shuchu Wujin. Chapter 46. The feeling of being protected by someone is wonderful. It can make people feel at ease, happy, and let go of their guard. Ninomiya Chizuru was looked at by his gentle eyes, and some of the fear, tension, and uneasiness in her heart were dissipated. She wanted to struggle a little bit, to throw away his hand and not let him hold it tightly. But as the roller coaster continued to climb, the angle tilted and the body became unbalanced. It made her instinctively exert strength to hold onto something. Ah! Unlike her, Igarashi Runa has no one to control and can only rely on safety facilities. She is already playing soprano. At this moment, most of Ninomiya Chizuru's attention was attracted by the people next to her. When everyone around you is screaming wantonly, your voice will become very small, and no one will notice you, because the fear of the environment is enough to suppress everything. He's not afraid at all. Did he choose Fuji-Q Highland just for this moment? Ninomiya Chizuru was still afraid of the environment, but looking at Kurosawa Hikaru's face, she couldn't help but think about it secretly. Soon, the roller coaster climbed up a 121-degree slope, reversed and fell. Ah! At this moment, Kurosawa Hikaru couldn't help but scream. However, even though he was screaming out of fear, his hand was still tightly holding Ninomiya Chizuru's palm. Ah! As he lost his composure, Ninomiya Chizuru was also shrouded in fear, and screamed. Once fear breaks out, it will spread indefinitely unless there is some powerful force to stop it. However, no one can stop this train. 7 reversals, marching in the dark, everyone shouting loudly. Not only because of fear, but also for decompression and release. The impactful excitement of the roller coaster can make people forget everything in a short period of time. Finally, the train reached the end and stabilized. We've arrived. The voice of the staff tried to wake everyone up and bring them back to reality. In addition, there are people coming forward to help tourists unlock the safety devices and get off the flying car. After all, this high-speed flying car is extremely popular and there is no need to wait. As the safety devices were unlocked and no longer fixed to the flying car, everyone stepped off one after another. Don't let go yet. As she got out of the car, Ninomiya Chizuru noticed that he was still holding her hand, glanced at Runa who was still in shock, and whispered, "If I let you go, you won't be able to stand still." Kurosawa Hikaru didn't agree this time, but couldn't put it down. Her hands are soft and slender, yet boneless, with smooth and delicate skin. They are very small and feel so good that people have an urge to let them go for the rest of their lives. And in front of his eyes, there was a line of words. Mission progress update, Ninomiya Chizuru, heart rate 2/3. Obviously, Ninomiya-sensei was not disgusted. If you don't let go, you'll be seen. Seeing that he didn't let go, Ninomiya Chizuru looked at Runa again and became a little anxious. Although she said this, she didn't have the strength to struggle. After all, She had just finished riding the high-speed car and her soul had not completely returned to her body. Realizing that her concerns were not as simple as being reserved, Kurosawa reluctantly let go of his hand, but still held her arms and body. Exciting. So exciting. After a while, Igarashi Runa came to his senses and exclaimed that he was satisfied. She has played roller coasters before, but no matter which time it was far inferior to this high-speed ride. Because her body was almost limp, she could not stand very steadily. There are still a few roller coasters, do you want to go play them again? Kurosawa Hikaru moved his steps, freed up a palm to support her back, and said with a smile. Play, why don't you play? Igarashi Runa was very passionate and she wanted to play to the end. Want to continue playing? Ninomiya Chizuru hadn't recovered yet, her heartbeat was still very fast and her breathing was a little rapid. When she heard this, she immediately panicked. Don't you want to play? Igarashi Runa heard this and asked immediately. In response to this question, Ninomiya Chizuru glanced at Kurosawa Hikari and hesitated. The choice before her was actually not whether to ride the roller coaster or not. If they continue to play, it means they will still hold hands during the roller coaster ride. Then let's continue. After hesitating for a few seconds, Ninomiya Chizuru thought about it and said, pretending not to notice. Take a break first. After receiving her agreement, Igarashi Runa smiled and then said. Immediately, the three of them walked together, walked to a chair nearby, and sat down with their backs against the wall. As they sat down, everyone relaxed their bodies. The legs are really long. Kurosawa Hikaru looked at Ninomiya Chizuru beside him and couldn't help but think. She was wearing a tight skirt, and although she was not wearing stockings, her slender and straight legs were still very eye-catching. Among the girls he knew, teacher Ninomiya was definitely among the tallest, with a height of 1.7 meters, which was a relatively rare figure among the neon girls. It is worth mentioning that although Igarashi Runa is not that tall, about 160 centimeters, her body proportions are very good. She wears mini skirts, plump and white, and her long and slender thighs are also very good looking. After resting like this for a while, they set off again. Compared to the facilities in the children's park, which do not require queuing, all the roller coaster projects require queuing. Fortunately, the time is not long. When Fuji-Q Highland was built, it was known as the world's four bests, namely the highest, the largest drop, the longest, and the fastest. Although it has been caught up by later parks in these years, it is still famous and popular. On another roller coaster, after the staff helped to pull the safety facilities again, before the train started, Kurosawa Hikaru looked at the slender and small palm of Ninomiya Chizuru placed in front of him, and his heartbeat accelerated a little. After hesitating for a while, before the excitement began, Kurosawa Hikaru plucked up the courage to reach out and hold her hand. Ninomiya Chizuru glanced at him, bit her lip and turned her head away. She did not struggle, but let him pull her. This look was full of resentment and helplessness, as if she was saying, I knew you would be like this. But even with such a look, she did not mean to refuse. The small action of deliberately turning her head away and pretending not to see it made Kurosawa Hikaru feel overjoyed. So cute. Kurosawa Hikaru only felt his heart pounding, and couldn't help sighing in his heart. He was suddenly very glad that he could get the system. It was not because of the talent and ability brought by the permanent reward, but because of the triggering conditions of the dating task of the system. The system will only trigger the task when it detects that the other party has the idea of dating. If this task is not triggered, he is afraid that he will never send a date invitation to Mr. Ninomiya in his life, let alone have the opportunity to experience such a moment. Heartbeat, satisfaction, happiness, such an experience is impressive and unforgettable. He has a feeling that even if he can't grow old with Mr. Ninomiya in this life, he will never forget this moment. This is a precious and heart-warming memory. Rumble. The roller coaster started, and Kurosawa's life also officially started. Here are the second update. Please vote for recommendation and monthly tickets. I would like to thank all the readers here. Tokyo's most affectionate. Author, Wodada Shuchu Wujin. Chapter 47. Taking advantage of the time, they played all the roller coasters. Including queuing and resting, after experiencing these, it was already past 12 noon. In a restaurant in Fuji-Q Highland, 3 people sat down and ordered whatever they wanted. Comfortable. Igarashi Runa was lying on the table. Regardless of her appearance, her whole body was weak, but the expression on her face was extremely satisfied. Leaving aside other things, she had a great time this time. Although it's a bit scary, it's quite fun, Kurosawa Hikaru said. What are you going to do in the afternoon? Ninomiya Chizuru nodded, feeling deeply in agreement, and then asked. Play with what you see. Igarashi Runa decided that since she was here today, she would have a good time. This paradise has so many famous facilities. It's rare to come here once and you must leave with a lot of fun. What do you play when you see something? Kurosawa Hikaru couldn't help but look embarrassed when he heard this decision. What's wrong? What's your plan? Noticing that something was wrong with his expression, Ninomiya Chizuru asked. There's no plan. Kurosawa Hikaru glanced at her, his expression calmed down, and he shook his head. Seeing that he had something on his mind but refused to say anything, Ninomiya Chizuru became curious, but was helpless and couldn't ask further questions. That's it, I decided to play with whatever I see. Runa Igarashi decided the matter in one breath. The other 2 people had no objections. I have a problem, I need to talk about it first. At this moment, Igarashi Runa suddenly glanced at Kurosawa Hikari opposite and Chizuru beside him. What? Are we going back to Tokyo today? That must be the answer. Ninomiya Chizuru knew the answer without even thinking about it. Spending the night at Fuji-Q Highland? Although for tourists, a trip of 2 days and 1 night, or even 3 days and 2 nights is more suitable, so that they can have a more comprehensive and relaxing time. But they came by car, and although they were a little tired, there was no need to spend the night outside. In this case, let's walk quickly in the afternoon and experience all the facilities as much as possible. Realizing that she had no intention of spending the night, Igarashi Runa did not object and nodded. Not long after, the restaurant brought lunch, which was very simple. After eating and drinking, plus resting, it was already 1 p.m. After resting in the restaurant, Ninomiya Chizuru went to the toilet. Why don't you go change clothes? Taking advantage of this gap, Igarashi Runa looked around, then lowered his head and whispered a reminder. Although Kurosawa Hikaru's outfit is fashionable and handsome, with a high fashion value and a high turnaround rate in the amusement park, it is not Chizuru's type after all. I thought about it and let it go. Although this outfit is not the type she likes, it is also the boundary that distinguishes the teacher-student relationship. Kurosawa Hikaru thought about this question and shook his head. Boundary, Igarashi Runa didn't understand. The me on weekends is not the same person as the me at school. The reason why I match them this way is to make her feel this way. Kurosawa Hikaru nodded and explained. Is that so? Thank you very much, Miss Runa, for today. If you really want to thank me, just treat me to a few more meals when things are done. Seeing that he had his own plans, Igarashi Runa didn't say much and just smiled. No problem. Kurosawa Hikaru smiled. It was very simple to treat him to a meal. In fact, he originally wanted to change clothes this morning, but after thinking about it, he gave up. Although in terms of clothing, it is easier to please people if it conforms to the woman's aesthetics and needs. But he feels that in the relationship between men and women, pleasing and giving in are undesirable behaviors. He can change his clothes on the next date, but if he changes directly today, it would be too deliberate. He has no independent soul and consciousness and just goes along with it. I've already paid the bill, let's go. After a while, Ninomiya Chizuru came back and said. The two nodded, stood up, picked up their belongings, and walked out of the restaurant. Kurosawa. Just after walking out of the restaurant, Ninomiya Chizuru suddenly handed something to Kurosawa Hikaru. Kurosawa Hikaru looked down and was a little surprised to find that it was a folding umbrella. I just saw it being sold in the store and bought a handful. Ninomiya Chizuru caught his surprised gaze and said calmly. Thank you. Kurosawa Hikaru didn't refuse and took it. It was summer now and the climate was hot. Although he was a man and didn't care much about getting tanned, he was still very hot under the sun. Especially in the afternoon, the sun gets hotter and hotter. After walking out of the restaurant, the three of them held umbrellas and started walking in the amusement park. It's so hot. Although she shared an umbrella with Chizuru, Igarashi Runa still felt that the ground was like a steamer, constantly emitting heat, and she couldn't help but say. The air conditioning in the restaurant just now was so comfortable. When we exit the restaurant, it is simply the difference between heaven and hell. That's what it's like when you come out to play. Kurosawa Hikaru also agreed. It's fun to go out and play, but you also have to bear the feelings brought about by the weather. Holding an umbrella, they walked less anxiously. In the afternoon, as decided, they played whatever they saw. For example, the moon roulette, the screaming pendulum, and the iron bone banjo. This iron bone banjo is a 50-meter high rotating swing. After experiencing the roller coaster, these projects are more exciting and relaxing. In the afternoon, due to the different facilities, Kurosawa Hikaru did not hold Ninomiya Chizuru's hand. Of course, this was also related to playing hard to get. He felt that he had taken the initiative enough in the morning, and then waited for the other party to respond. Walking around, chatting and laughing, plus queuing for some facilities, time passed quickly, and it was past 4 o'clock in the blink of an eye. When you come to an amusement park, especially if you come with the opposite sex, you cannot miss the classic Ferris wheel. This is an essential item in any amusement park. The three people sat on the Ferris wheel together. The atmosphere was not so ambiguous and charming. It was very natural, like three friends hanging out together. The 10-minute Ferris wheel ride is over. Sure enough, the last ride in the amusement park has to be the Ferris wheel. Igarashi Runa crossed her fingers with her hands and stretched, showing off her graceful curves. Is it the last journey? Ninomiya Chizuru was a little surprised when she heard this. Yes, including the 2-hour drive, we estimate that we will be back in Tokyo around 7 o'clock. Igarashi Runa nodded and said. Aren't we going to play in a haunted house? Ninomiya Chizuru looked at Runa, and couldn't help but look at Kurosawa Hikaru, wanting to see his reaction. Ever since she learned last night that she was coming to Fuji-Q Highland, she had already been mentally prepared to go to the haunted house. As a result, she had waited until now, but there had been no movement. Forget it about the haunted house. There's no need to be afraid of ghosts. Igarashi Runa shook her head and waved her hands. When Ninomiya Chizuru heard this, she didn't know how to respond. Is she afraid of ghosts? Of course it's scary, after all, the theme of a place like a haunted house is frightening and atmosphere. However, if she were alone, she would definitely not dare to go there, but this time there were three people traveling together, so she was still looking forward to seeing what is known as the most terrifying haunted house in Nihon. Didn't you go buy rice balls this morning? I teased him about choosing Fuji-Q Highland because I wanted to take you into the haunted house, but you might be afraid of ghosts, so you might not go in. But he said he was also afraid of ghosts and didn't want to go. He mainly wanted to play roller coaster. Seeing her unpleasant reaction, Igarashi Runa approached her and whispered. Tokyo's most affectionate. Author, Wodada Shuchu Wujin. Chapter 48. Is he also afraid of ghosts? After hearing these words, Ninomiya Chihi looked suspiciously. However, She thought it was normal. But how can anyone not be afraid of ghosts? But if you come to Fuji-Q and don't try both the roller coaster and the haunted house, then your visit will be in vain. Even though she thought so, Ninomiya Chizuru was still a little unwilling to give up. Should she say it or not, she really wanted to see Siji General Hospital, this terrifying maze known to be extremely dangerous. That's what I say, but there's no need to spend money to scare yourself. Do you want to go? Seeing that she didn't plan to go, Ninomiya Chizuru simply asked. I definitely want to, but I'll wait until next time, when I can find a boyfriend. Igarashi Runa nodded and said immediately. Why don't we go now? There are many people this time. You want to go? A little. Kurosawa, before you go back, do you want to go to the haunted house? Seeing her offering to play in the haunted house, Igarashi Runa immediately turned around and asked. Haunted house? Didn't it say that the Ferris wheel is the last ride? When Kurosawa Hikaru heard this, his expression changed. Seeing this scene, Ninomiya Chizuru couldn't help but secretly thought, he is really scared. His expression was very strange at noon today. Could it be that he was worried about seeing the haunted house? Suddenly I remembered that Fuji-Q also has what is known as the scariest haunted house. It would be a shame not to go there. Igarashi Runa spread her hands and said. It's a bit late now, why not next time? Kurosawa Hikaru hesitated and hesitated. Let's go, let's go. Chizuru also said he wants to go. There are many of us, so don't be afraid. Seeing his amazing acting skills, Igarashi Runa walked forward, grabbed his arm and said. Miss Ninomiya, do you want to go too? Kurosawa Hikaru raised his head and looked at Ninomiya Chizuru. Faced with his pitiful look, which tried to make her shake her head for help, Ninomiya Chizuru couldn't help but be stunned. She never imagined that Kurosawa Hikaru had such a side, that he was so afraid of ghosts, even more afraid than she was. Yes, after being surprised, Ninomiya Chizuru nodded. There are so many things to do today, it would be a pity not to experience Fuji-Q's signature haunted house. Let's go. With her nod, Igarashi Runa grabbed Kurosawa Hikaru's arm and started walking. Let's go, Ninomiya Chizuru also responded. At the same time, Kurosawa Hikaru, who was following behind, saw a line of words appear in front of his eyes. Mission progress update, Ninomiya Chizuru, heart rate 3/3, goal achieved. Seeing this mission accomplished, Kurosawa Hikaru was momentarily confused. He was originally thinking about showing off his boyfriend power in the haunted house to make teacher Ninomiya's heart flutter again. I never expected that. I didn't even go in, it was completed directly. This can also move the heart. It seems that the concept of heartbeat varies from person to person. Kurosawa Hikaru couldn't help but think. The feeling of beating heart was very strange. He felt that he had concepts and cognition. For example, at a certain moment, that person did something special or impressive that made you feel excited. But what he just did was just to show that he was afraid of ghosts, but in the end, teacher Ninomiya was moved, which was really depressing. In other words, there are only 2 mission objectives left. Kurosawa Hikaru didn't get too entangled. It was always a good thing to complete the task, and then he focused on the present. Let her hold your arm for 5 minutes, let her cry. These 2 tasks are neither difficult nor difficult. It's easy to hold your arms in the haunted house for 5 minutes. The question is, how afraid of ghosts Mr. Ninomiya is and whether he will cry when he is scared by ghosts. After a while, they walked forward and found the haunted house. This is very simple. After all, when you rode the Ferris wheel just now, you could overlook the entire amusement park. This is even more amazing than the photos show. Arriving at the gate of Jikyo General Hospital, Igarashi Runa looked at the building in front of him and smacked his lips. Desolate, dilapidated, and gloomy, this is a large hospital, but the exterior wall is stained, as if it had been burned by fire. Even the signboard on top was broken into two pieces. This house is located in front of you, giving people a sense of danger, as if telling all outsiders that this is an ominous place, so be careful before entering. Really? Ninomiya Chizuru couldn't help but push up her glasses, feeling a little chill down her spine. Kurosawa Hikaru didn't say anything, he had to pretend that he was afraid of ghosts. This is Miss Runa's strategy. He must not mention the haunted house today, and even more so, he must show that he doesn't want to go to the haunted house. The fact is just as she guessed. After experiencing all the projects, Miss Ninomiya really has ideas about the haunted house. 3 tickets. After waiting and watching, Ninomiya Chizuru mustered up the courage to go forward, took out her wallet and negotiated with the staff. Although they bought a pass and could enjoy most of the facilities in the park, there was an additional fee for the haunted house. From this point, we can also see how special the super ferocious trembling maze of Siji General Hospital is. The staff member was a black-haired woman wearing white clothes. She sat at a small table outside the gate. She took the money and laughed strangely. Squeak. Immediately afterwards, the iron gate at the gate opened. The rusty iron door opened, and the sound was harsh and made people feel uncomfortable. Immediately, the black-haired woman didn't say much, just stretched out her hand to indicate that they could enter. Her silence was very strange and frightening. Let's go. Runa Igarashi was the first to bear the brunt and took the lead. Immediately afterwards, Ninomiya Chizuru and Kurosawa Hikaru looked at each other and began to step across the door. However, the closer they went to the door of the hospital, the closer the distance between them became. In the face of fear, human beings are creatures that like to face fear together. This is instinctive and irresistible. As soon as I walked into the hospital, I was hit by a strong smell of disinfectant, which was more obvious than the hospital and was very pungent. When I first entered the door, there was no scary shock, but just like a real hospital, it was extremely desolate and gloomy, giving people goosebumps. At a glance, there is no end in sight. The farther away it gets, the darker it becomes, as if it is a terrifying tunnel. You too, don't do it. We've just walked in. Let's start walking. Igarashi Runa turned around and found the two of them standing motionless, and was immediately speechless. Here we come. Kurosawa Hikaru was a little frightened, but he was a man after all and very courageous, so he responded. But as soon as he took a step, his arm was pulled. What's wrong? Kurosawa Hikaru turned around and saw Ninomiya-sensei grabbing his arm. The legs are weak. Ninomiya Chizuru hesitated for 2 seconds, then turned away with a guilty conscience and whispered. In fact, she is very afraid of ghosts. Although she has just started, her legs are already weak and she cannot walk. Then I'll hold you. Kurosawa nodded, then pulled her away with his arm. Igarashi Runa, who was walking in front, was very satisfied when she saw this scene. The effect of this haunted house is really strong. Just like that, they officially set off. Yeah, after walking a few steps, he passed by a room without a door. Ninomiya Chizuru glanced inside and was immediately startled. Kurosawa Hikaru was startled by this sudden scream, and at the same time, he suddenly felt a warmth in his arm. Looking sideways, he saw Ninomiya Chizuru, who was very frightened, her eyes closed tightly, and she was holding his arm in her arms, as if grasping a life-saving straw, refusing to let go. Seeing this scene, Kurosawa Hikaru felt it was funny and cute. Even though I was so scared, I still insisted on playing in the haunted house. I watched the RNG game today and was delayed for an hour. Sorry. Please also ask for recommendation votes, follow-up reading, monthly votes, and comments. Please, this is really important to me. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Tokyo's Most Affectionate. Author, Wodada Shuchu Wujin. Chapter 49. The light in the haunted house is very dark, and the cold wind blows, which makes people panic. Coupled with some sound effects, it is enough to evoke the fear deep in the heart. Despite this, Igarashi Runa, who was walking in front, was not afraid at all. It's not because she's not afraid of ghosts, but because she's in a good mood. She had already noticed it, and the two people behind her hugged each other closely, holding hands and walking together. We have to find an opportunity to slip away and give them enough space, Igarashi Runa thought in her mind. She glanced back furtively, and then quietly quickened her pace. This is a very subtle movement. If you don't keep looking at her, you won't even notice that she is walking very fast. Kurosawa, you have to work harder. A few minutes later, Igarashi Runa looked back. It was dark and gloomy, but there was no one. He took a long breath and said to himself. After a day of preparation, the biggest assist was finally achieved. As for what the relationship between Kurosawa and Chizuru will become after the baptism of this haunted house trip, she doesn't care. Anyway, she has tried her best. After thinking about it, she did not stop, but continued to walk quickly, to further distance herself and absolutely eliminate the possibility of being caught up. However, Siji General Hospital is known as the scariest haunted house in the world, and it is not for nothing. Ah! As Igarashi Runa advanced alone, a cry of pain that seemed to be subconscious directly opened its mysterious veil. The sound was very strange, like the whine of a patient lying in bed and suffering from illness. And where the patient is, there is a door not far ahead. It is the only way to pass, and it cannot even be crossed. Hearing this voice, Igarashi Runa suddenly came back to her senses, looked around, and suddenly realized that she was facing the most terrifying haunted house alone. The staff of the haunted house are all actors, and they are all fake. Artists are bold, because the school festival class in high school held a haunted house. Igarashi Runa, who thought she had experience, said to herself, comforted herself, and continued to move forward. She was not afraid and strode forward directly. Sure enough, there were 3 beds in the room, which were all messy. There were also gray and stained curtains, and there was another person. Gilug. Although she was trying to convince herself that it was a lie, Igarashi Runa glanced at it subconsciously and her body couldn't help but stiffen. What I saw on the hospital bed was a man who had been disfigured by the flames and had burn scars on his face. At least 70% of his body was wrapped in blood-oozing bandages, and his hands were wearing hanging bottles. The infusion tube is suspended. Fortunately, the patient was motionless and did not move at all. Although it looked scary, it was not dangerous. The makeup skills are great. Igarashi Runa forced a smile and gave him a thumbs up as a sign of encouragement and to comfort herself. Da-da-da-da. At this moment, the sound of footsteps suddenly sounded from behind. It was the sound of high heels stepping on the ground, and they were walking quickly this way. Igarashi Runa was frightened by this sudden visitor. She looked back and saw that someone seemed to be walking over in the darkness. She only felt a numb scalp and hurriedly stepped forward and ran forward. The horror of a haunted house is difficult to describe in words, because it is a design that is thought up by scary people. It is not just a visual experience, but an all-round experience. Environment, light, sound, characters, situation, a series of factors combined together. In other words, unless there is no emotion of fear and fear, if not, there is always a way to scare people. In the darkness, Kurosawa Hikaru and Ninomiya Chizuru were walking together. Their pace is very slow, not walking fast. It can be said that they take one step at a time. Ninomiya Chizuru didn't speak, she just hugged Kurosawa Hikaru's arm tightly and didn't let go. She looked around nervously, fearing that a ghost would suddenly come out of some dark corner. Compared to her fear, Kurosawa Hikaru felt very happy. In fact, he is also very afraid of ghosts. After all, even if he has a system, he has no superpowers. He is still a mortal. He will instinctively feel afraid and uncomfortable in this dark and gloomy environment. Having said that, most of his fears were numbed by the warmth and softness he felt in his arms. The two of them were almost close to each other, and the pungent smell of disinfectant in the hospital had faded away, replaced by the refreshing scent of hair and perfume. Comfortable, so comfortable. This is not only refreshing for the body, but also for the soul. Because he found that after entering the haunted house, he didn't even have to do anything, teacher Ninomiya already held his arm and wouldn't let go. If this continues, it won't be long before the 5-minute task is completed. In addition, he felt that Miss Ninomiya's appearance of a trembling little woman after she shed her strength and calmness was really cute and pitiful. Perhaps the clues were visible during the roller coaster ride, but now it is complete. Kurosawa, where is Runa? After walking like this for a while, Ninomiya Chizuru suddenly realized something. Yes, where is Miss Runa? Kurosawa Hikaru had already noticed Igarashi Runa walking away, but he pretended to be unaware of this question. Runa Chizuru Ninomiya, who was already frightened when she realized that her best friend was missing, immediately became confused and shouted several times in a hurry. The shouts echoed in the empty and eerie corridor, but there was no response. What should I do? Runa is missing. Is it possible that she is in danger? Chizuru Ninomiya, who was originally worried about her own safety, began to worry about her best friend's situation. Probably not. This is a haunted house, not a haunted house. Maybe you can hide somewhere and watch a show. Kurosawa Hikaru shook his head and consoled him. But I heard that there have been supernatural events in this haunted house, there may really be a ghost here. Ninomiya Chizuru didn't think so. She looked left and right again, and her heart was beating wildly. This was not because she was excited, but because she was frightened by her own words. Because she had an appointment with Fuji-Q Highland last night, she went online to check the news about this park. Among them, the thing that concerned her the most was the haunted house. We're here now, so let's finish the journey bravely. Kurosawa Hikaru could feel her body trembling and her attention was drawn back from comfort, so he comforted her. Yes, Ninomiya Chizuru nodded bravely. Although I was on tenterhooks, after walking like this for a while, I felt very safe and nothing happened. There is also good news for Kurosawa Hikaru, that is, the mission progress has been updated, and the mission goal of crossing his arms has been achieved. Ah! But at this moment, a groan came from the front. This sound instantly attracted the attention of the two people and they looked forward. In the darkness, I could vaguely see an open door, blocking the way forward. That room had a faint light, which was very conspicuous in the darkness. Kurosawa, why don't we go back? Realizing that she had to go into that room, Ninomiya Chizuru, who had just mustered up the courage, hugged her arms harder and backed down. Tokyo's Most Affectionate. Author, Wodada Shuchu Wujin. Chapter 50. Ms. Runa might be waiting for us in front, there is light there. Kurosawa Hikaru comforted her. The mission goal was almost completed, and all he needed was to shed tears. If he got out of this haunted house, he didn't know what he would do to make teacher Ninomiya, a strong and fierce woman, cry. Putting aside the mission, he finally came to Psyche General Hospital and wanted to experience it completely. Okay, thinking that Runa might be in front, Ninomiya Chizuru hesitated, but still nodded. Don't be afraid. Kurosawa, why are you not afraid at all? Because you are here. Faced with this problem, Kurosawa Hikaru turned his head slightly and glanced at the left arm held in her arms, and smiled. We are two people, so we are relatively calm. Runa is alone, so she might be frightened. Let's find her quickly. Ninomiya Chizuru was a little shy. She pondered for a few seconds and then deliberately misinterpreted the meaning. During the conversation, their footsteps did not stop. Although it is not a two-person trip, they are walking together holding each other, and coupled with fear, the pace is quite slow. Finally, they came to the door, but instead of going in directly, they stood outside and peeked inside. Ah! Just as he poked his head to take a peek, the moaning sound sounded again, making the two of them tremble and retract their heads in perfect sync. It's so scary, what should I do? What should I do? Ninomiya Chizuru was frightened. At this moment, she no longer had the demeanor and majesty of the female teacher. In this situation, she is like all girls who are afraid of ghosts. Go in, Miss Runa is waiting for us. Kurosawa Hikaru actually wanted to run away, but thinking of the mission goal, he still gritted his teeth and mustered up the courage. As he gathered up his courage, he suddenly froze. Could the task goal be set up to provide him with more motivation to do more things with girls on dates? As long as the mission objectives are not completed, he might turn around and go back. When he walked into the room, he saw 3 beds and a patient covered in bandages, as if he had been burned by a fire. In this regard, Kurosawa Hikaru and Ninomiya Chizuru watched with fear and cautiously moved forward, even holding their breath, fearing that the patient would suddenly sit up and startle them. Fortunately, the patient did not move, but only moaned from time to time, as if to tell others that he was still alive, but in pain. Was he burned? Walking to the middle of the room, because the patient had never been scary, Ninomiya Chizuru's uneasy heart calmed down a little, and she became curious. She held Kurosawa's arm close to her body, walking half a step slower, as if hiding behind her, and stuck her head out. Having someone by her side still supported her soul and was not enough to be broken down. I guess so, Kurosawa Hikaru nodded as he thought of the outer wall of the haunted house, which looked like it had been burned by fire. Ta-ta! At this moment, the sound of high heels suddenly sounded from behind. This sound was like a voice wearing high heels walking out of a certain room. Da-da-da-da. The next moment, the footsteps sounded one after another, each step getting closer and louder, as if announcing that the distance was getting closer. Let's go! Kurosawa Hikaru was frightened when he heard the rapid footsteps. For a moment, the two panicked people hurried forward. Ah! But just after walking a few steps, Kurosawa Hikaru heard teacher Ninomiya behind him scream in pain. What's wrong? Kurosawa Hikaru turned around and saw that she was standing unsteadily, bent over and sinking, sucking in the cold air. My foot is sprained. Ninomiya Chizuru stood on one foot and gently raised her left foot wearing high heels, which was very painful. Da-da-da. They were forced to stay, but the sound of approaching footsteps did not stop. It's over, she's here. When she was shocked to realize this, Ninomiya Chizuru, who already had pain in her feet, was anxious and frightened. She looked back and grabbed Kurosawa Hikaru's arm tightly and refused to let go, for fear that he would abandon her. Mission goal, make her cry, has been achieved. A trip to the amusement park with Chizuru Ninomiya. The 4 mission goals are achieved, the mission is completed, and the entry-level musical instrument, piano, permanent, and entry-level painting skills, permanent, are rewarded. At the same time, he felt something pouring into his mind, which was the knowledge of piano and painting. Why at this time, however, Kurosawa Hikaru had no intention of absorbing it carefully, but felt a sense of irritation. In other words, the mission was completed, and teacher Ninomiya burst into tears. This was indeed the case. Tears flowed from the corners of her eyes, but Kurosawa Hikaru looked at it but couldn't be happy. Although he wanted to make teacher Ninomiya cry, he never thought of hurting her. I don't want to either. Hearing his irritable words, Ninomiya Chizuru, who was already confused, felt aggrieved, and the tears in the corners of her eyes became thicker. If possible, she didn't want to sprain her feet, but she was wearing high heels, which was what happened just now in a hurry. Sorry, I wasn't talking about you just now, I was saying that the ghost came too suddenly. Kurosawa Hikaru was stunned when he saw her aggrieved look. He realized that he had accidentally expressed his resentment and quickly apologized and explained. Oh. Ninomiya Chizuru heard this explanation and nodded. At the same time, the footsteps were approaching and walked into the room. It was a woman in a nurse's uniform. Her face was very strange, just like the female nurse in Silent Hill. She had no facial features. She held a scalpel dripping with blood in her left hand and an extra long syringe in her right hand. The exposed skin was bluish-white, with some traces of blue veins. Whether it was her appearance, decoration, or the weapon in her hand, it gave people an extremely dangerous sense of oppression. At this moment, Ninomiya Chizuru suddenly realized something and wanted to turn back. Don't turn back, don't look. However, before she turned back, Kurosawa Hikaru's right hand held her cheek. Is she coming? Ninomiya Chizuru's voice was a little trembling, and she felt a chill on her back. The unknown that could not be seen aroused her fear even more. It's okay, I'll take care of everything. Can you still leave? Kurosawa Hikaru held her cheek, forcing her to only look at himself, and said softly. It hurts hearing his gentle words. Ninomiya Chizuru did not show off and shook her head. After getting this answer, Kurosawa Hikaru wanted to pull his hand out of her arms. However, Ninomiya Chizuru refused to let go and held her tightly, fearing that he would abandon her here. Don't be afraid, I will carry you on my back. Don't worry, I will never abandon you. Sensing her emotions, Kurosawa Hikaru comforted her. Realizing what he was going to do, Ninomiya Chizuru no longer held back or refused, nodded, and slowly let go of her hand. Pulling his arm out of her arms, Kurosawa Hikaru glanced at the nurse again, then turned around and bent down. Without waiting for Kurosawa Hikaru to say anything, Ninomiya Chizuru hurriedly lay on her and refused to let go. In such a terrible place, she didn't want to stay alone, and she had to grab something. Let's go. Holding her thighs with both hands and carrying her on his back, Kurosawa Hikaru stood up and said. The next moment, he took a step and started to walk forward. Lying on his broad and strong back with her feet off the ground, Ninomiya Chizuru felt a very strong sense of security. When she was about to leave the room, she couldn't help but look back and saw the strange-looking nurse, the creepy super-long syringe and the blood-dripping scalpel. Although she found the ghost very scary, Ninomiya Chizuru found that the distance between her and the other party was getting farther and farther as Kurosawa Hikaru moved forward, and suddenly she felt less scary. Just then, the nurse waited until they finally moved, then silently took steps and began to chase. However, even if Kurosawa Hikaru was carrying someone on his back, his speed was still very fast, and the distance was getting farther and farther. Haha, seeing that she was about to be thrown away, Ninomiya Chizuru's mood, which was upset because of her sprained ankle, suddenly improved a lot. Hearing her laughter, the ghost nurse suddenly became anxious and screamed and howled, no longer chasing quickly, but started running. Kurosawa, she's crazy, run. Found that the ghost was crazy, Ninomiya Chizuru was immediately scared and said hurriedly. Okay. Kurosawa Hikaru heard her laughter and the crazy scream, and he started running with a smile on his face. At the beginning of the month, I am asking for monthly tickets, recommendation tickets, follow-up reading, collection, investment, and everything. Thank you all readers. If you finish reading it in one breath, please click to invest. It's free, no money.